Prior to 2004, hurricanes in the Polk County area were minimal. In 1960, Hurricane Donna crossed through the Florida Keys at Conch Key, just northeast of Marathon. The hurricane continued to the northwest along the southwest coast of Florida before making landfall on Goodland, a short distance east of Marco Island, with winds of 120 miles per hour. Donna then traversed to Naples and Fort Myers before heading inland to the northeast. In 1992, Hurricane Andrew came across South Florida, causing about $25.3 billion in damages in Florida, making it the costliest hurricane to hit the state at the time, feeling its impacts as far north as Sarasota County. In 2004, 3 hurricanes: Charley, Francis, and Jean crisscrossed through Polk County. According to the National Hurricane Center, they resulted in 17 deaths across Florida and about $29.8 billion worth of damages following their destructive trek through Florida and other states northward.
I did go through Hurricane Donna in the 60s. I was 6 or 7 years old, and back then people just took care of themselves basically. We had a pitcher pump in our backyard, and all of our neighbors came to us to get water. We were without power for a couple of weeks, but people didn't think much about it then. We didn't even have a water heater at the time. So, you just lived.
But really for years, there wasn't much after Donna that I recall. There was a few storms, but nothing that really sticks in my mind. Hurricane Elena, which wasn't much of a hurricane, blew an oak tree down in my front yard, so I always remember that one, as I had to cut up the oak tree. But really, probably not until Andrew, which was in the, I guess in the early 90s, maybe 92, somewhere along in there when Hurricane Andrew come across South Florida.
Back in those days, we didn't have the infrastructure that we have today, because keep in mind, Polk County had not taken a direct hit from a serious hurricane since the 1960s. We really didn't know what it was like, other than the fact that the Sheriff's Office responded to assist South Florida when Andrew devastated that area.
Well, really, I had not experienced any tropical storms that I really remember of any magnitude. We had some feeder bands, stuff like that, but it was something I didn't really pay attention to prior to coming in to public safety. Whenever I came into Polk County EMS, we had Andrew, and that was my first good glimpse, and that was down at Florida City, south of Miami, and that was my first really paying attention to tropical systems. And then here comes 2004.
I can vividly remember the call where Charley was making its way up Highway 17, and actually probably at this time was probably still in Polk County, or had just cleared Polk County. And first the EM director in DeSoto County, Arcadia, came on the line, and she said in the middle of the storm, the facility that they were using as a shelter had damage. So when the eye of the Hurricane Charley came over, they moved everybody from that facility across the street to a different facility. And then the Hardy County EM director came on, and Hardy County's EOC, even still today, was the old county jail. And at the time, they thought they may have a fire in their EOC, and they didn't know where they were going to go. They were having to scramble to come up with a plan, because it was still storm conditions. And then David Cash, the EM director in Polk County, came on. And vividly, I could tell, I've known David for forever. And even back then, I could tell in his voice it was not a good day in Polk County. And he just said, hey, we've taken a major hit on the east side of our county. We're still having to assess the damage, but we know there's damage, we know there's power, we know there's significant debris, and we're gonna need help.
Right up through Fort Meade, then kind of into Lake Wells, and then on up to Orlando, and did tremendous damage all the way through Central Florida.
But I remember the order issued by Sheriff Crow. We were in the EOC, and Sheriff Crow said, Mike, he said, we're going to have to evacuate the mobile homes on the eastern part of the county because of the threat of high winds and flooding. And he issued that evacuation order. That was a key decision that was made by the sheriff in concert with all of us, because evacuating those mobile homes and getting people out of there before the storm hit made all the difference in the world between life or death.
The cell towers were on backup battery, but not generators. So within a few hours, the cell towers started going down. So as the day wore on, you couldn't even make a phone call. We were using the radio to do briefings, to let everybody in the agency and the other fire departments in around Polk County know what was going on.
County staff, emergency folks, responders had plenty of experience with hurricane conferences, but I don't think that we had too many people here who actually had experience with anything like we received in 2004, beginning with Charlie. It was a major storm that impacted all of Polk County, and then parts of Polk County, it was extreme. It was severe.
Charlie, Gene, and Francis crisscrossed our county over a period of 9 weeks. And I think that after each one, we learned something a little bit different about really the soul of the employees in Polk County government, and also the resiliency of our citizens. Because the citizens and their ability to be able to get through all of that disaster and to be able to clean their yards and try to get their life back to normal. I mean, that took a lot of courage from people, and it took a lot of courage from our employees as well, because certainly their homes and their families were affected by the hurricanes of 2004.
The first one, Charlie, was a real learning experience as far as how we're going to deal with things, how we're going to look at things. So there was a lot of learning on the fly with that particular event, and then to get hit 2 more times in that same year was just a continuation. It was a non-stop type event, really, from our standpoint, because it was, you deal with the emergency part of the event or the quick things you have to deal with, whether that's the flooding or debris, and you start working on that stuff, then you get hit again, and then you're dealing with what you were trying to finish up from the first one, then you go to the second one, start kind of from scratch, and then the third one. And so from my standpoint, the real thing was just dealing with FEMA, the documentation side of things, making sure we had good documentation. I remember days where I would come in early in the morning, work all day out in the field looking at things, dealing with issues, and then stay late at night till midnight doing things in the office as far as computer type work, dealing with emails and those types of things.
Charlie in 2004, it was supposed to come up the west coast through the Tampa area. And we were very leery of this horrible storm coming through such a populated area. At the last moment, it turned. And while we were in our meetings, we got a report from a meteorologist And this is what he said: "Ladies and gentlemen, the storm has turned. It's going to come across Charlotte Harbor, and it's going to ultimately come through Hardy County, Polk County, the east side." And that's exactly what it did. And he said, this is going to be a very tight, very condensed storm. It's going to be like an F1 tornado 2 miles wide, plus the other wind damage. That was a frightening thing to hear. And it turned out to be exactly that. It devastated the east part of the county. I was in that storm all night, and I was responsible, along with all of my colleagues, to coordinate recovery and helping people. And the teamwork was remarkable. The community helped each other. So we had all the community members out there. We had the trustees from the jail all out helping cut roads into areas so we could provide emergency services.
Here's what I remember the most. I had become county manager. I think I've been county manager for a year. And I think our entire leadership team, we were baptized under fire, no question about it. And what I remember after Charlie, I remember two things. I remember flying the county with a member of the Sheriff's Department and traveling the eastern part of the county from essentially Indian Lakes Estates to Frostproof to Lake Wales, Haines City, Dundee, and then back to Bartow. And what I remember the most looking down, I remember seeing the impact of the devastation, especially in the mobile home parks. I mean, you could see people's living rooms, you could see bedrooms, furniture just everywhere. People's possessions just totally destroyed, debris everywhere. And I remember thinking to myself, God help these people, because they're going to need your strength to be able to recover, because it really was just total devastation.
So nobody really knew what to do, except we needed to do something, and we needed to do it quick. And you know, that we were calling everybody that worked here to assist in any way we could, from the transportation folks. Obviously, they had to go out and work on roads, get those cleared, get down trees out of the way for the folks to begin the power restoration. And there was a lot of people without power in Polk County. And actually, FEMA was fairly quick to respond, and they brought in equipment to staged the equipment at the Lakeland Airport, and we were trying to get some of that equipment. And I was chairman in '04 as well, and we were having trouble. We knew it was all there. It had arrived, but they had not released it. And I made a decision that we were going to go get that equipment, and we notified the folks, because we were talking to them about the need for the generators, and they had towed quite a few generators in. And we had lift stations down all over the county. And if you're on central sewer and the lift station is down, it's not a good situation. So we knew we had to get those things up. So after a couple of days of being told that they did not have authorization to release the generators to us, I called the guy there, and I really think this was my finest hour in 20 years of county commission, that I called the guy and said, listen, I don't care authorization or not, we're coming to get generators. We got to have them. We've got just emergency situations all over the county, and it's really becoming a public health issue. We're leaving there with them. So whatever you have to do, we're coming, we're hooking up to them, and we're leaving. And I remember going, but I don't remember them putting up much of a fight.
We were at the old EOC at the Bartow Air Base, and we soon realized then that this operation was going to be big, and very fortunate for us that we did move down to the W.H. Stewart Center because there was not enough room in the old EOC at building 250, and we migrated down to the W.H. Stewart Center, and we started bringing in all the players to help the operational and recovery side of it.
Typically these events take time. You're concentrating more on the heavier hit areas at first. When it comes to the first in teams, the push teams and stuff like that, those were made up of the public safety groups and some people from the maintenance units. So basically go in, all they were doing was they were cutting, clearing, and basically trying to get the road open for public safety to get in, the ambulances, the sheriff's office, and that type of thing. That's what they did. Pushed it to the side and got out of the way and moved on. And then after the fact, they were then working, assisting our debris contractor with picking up debris along the roadways, and then the establishment of debris management sites where all this debris was being hauled to and processed. And then ultimately that's then disposed of.
We had to go about, especially with Charlie, we had to go, and all of them, but beginning with Charlie, we had to go about the process of getting those contracts for debris removal in place. And then once we got the contracts in place, then cities, of course, could dovetail those contracts legally, and they could arrange for debris pickup inside their city. Jim Freeman was deputy county manager at the time, and I remember saying to Jim privately, I said, well, Jim, I think you're going to be the debris king here. And so he took on that responsibility of working with our public safety director then, Larry Alexander, to be able to put a plan together. We had to have remote locations identified where we could take debris, store it, and then either burn it or haul it to appropriate sites.
If I'm not mistaken, that was the first time that we enabled PGTV for remote coverage. Up to that point, it had been studio coverage, and we were trying out the new truck and those things sort of on the fly and MacGyvering that stuff together to make it work. So that was a new endeavor, but we had hoped that anybody who did have power would be able to tune into that. So what you have with the communications effort is a weird dichotomy. Half of the county had power, half of the county didn't. So you have to do all the things. So for the part of the county that didn't have power, the hardest hit area in the east part of the county during Charlie, we went to a paper newsletter. One side of it was the Polk Recovery News. Not a catchy title, but it certainly got the job done. One side was in English, and it listed all the shelters. It listed all the updated information that we had about where power lines and trees were down. It listed where the centers were for ice or water distribution or meals ready to eat, whatever we had. And then on the flip side of that, we did the same thing in Spanish. And those newsletters went out on the street with our law enforcement personnel and with fire personnel and to the distribution centers in hopes of getting them into the hands of those folks that just didn't have power.
The role of Polk County Public Safety. The conference calls, the conference calls daily, the reporting, staying in communication, providing information that we could use to be able to make better decisions. That was steadfast. And that public safety, the Sheriff's Department, fire, rescue, and all the police departments and fire departments in Polk County and municipalities, we are stronger today because of the men and women that work in public safety. And all the folks that work in water plants, wastewater plants, the roadways, traffic, you name it. We're solid today because of the commitment that public servants have to serving their citizens and protecting their citizens from harm.
We had done some joint training with the Sheriff's Department just before Hurricane Charlie, some management incident command kind of training. And it was kind of the first time we really interacted real closely at that level with us. And it wasn't much long, a few months later, maybe 6 months later, we're working together in the Emergency Operations Center.
When the winds get over, I believe it's 45 miles an hour, the big boxes on the ambulances and the fire trucks can't respond because the winds will blow them over.
I remember we were having a problem with the high winds, and the ambulances are kind of high vehicles.
So when they were announcing on this call that because of the winds after 45 miles an hour, emergency services by ambulance and fire trucks would cease until the winds got under 45 miles an hour, I leaned over to my colleague, Colonel Hester, and I said, Colonel, I said, we'll run the emergency calls during the hurricane, during the height of the hurricane with our deputies. We'll let our deputies make the decision of whether they can get into the area and help and rescue the people and go to the hospital. When I announced that in the room, EMS and fire said, we'll put our paramedic firefighters and EMS folks in your patrol car.
And it worked fantastic. That was the first big call, big incident for me that we worked that closely with the Sheriff's Department. And we actually ended up transporting a couple, and I think there was one documented saving of a life because of that process.
And that's what we've always done. We put our life at risk to save other lives, and it worked.
We had an informal system in the fire department where if we were in a particular neighborhood and we knew one of the members' families was there, the crews would stop in, do a real quick check, hey, you okay? And then we would get the word back to that firefighter maybe working on the other side of the county. The community came together.
I really want people to understand through all this was how many state, local, and federal agencies are involved in hurricane response, and how many of our local people and our local agencies, divisions, departments are involved. Emergency management, there's only 3 or 4 of us back then, not many more now. We kind of coordinate everything, but the PGTV and the communications division is putting out all the announcements. The code inspectors having to go for weeks, to look at buildings to see if they were being brought up to code. The finance department worked on Hurricane Charlie for about 6 or 7 years before it was closed. So they were keeping books on that all that time. I can go on to the drainage people, 40 or 50 agencies that were involved in that.
Jeb Bush was governor at the time, and Bill Nelson was in the United States Senate representing Florida. Bill Nelson was one of the most thoughtful public servants that came through. And so he asked the most pointed questions about the path of the hurricane, about the strength, wanting to learn the details about where was the most damage, and then, of course, what could his office do to help us, penetrate the red tape involving the FEMA process. So he was extremely thoughtful. Jeb Bush, of course, his brother was president, George W. Bush. And I remember having a conversation, Governor Bush said, how soon will the schools be open? I said, Governor, it's going to be a challenge to get schools back open because I said, there's no power on the east side. And so where we have our cities, the power is out, and it's going to be several weeks before that power gets restored. Anything your office can do to get us more assistance from regional power companies to come in and help us restore power would be a great help. And so the governor, I think, must have responded to that request because within days there were more power companies coming in to assist the east side of our county, which had really been hit pretty hard by all the hurricanes.
All right, so we had daily conference calls with, I'm going to just call it stakeholders for lack of a better word, because it was all the city governments, it was the constitutional officers, it was the state legislative delegation, it was anybody that had a stake in it, it was the power companies, it was the telecom companies, and we were all rowing together. I mean, that's why there were no power struggles, because everybody kind of left those egos at the door and realized that we had a huge mission to accomplish and that lives and livelihoods and quality of life was at stake. And once you focused on the mission, then it didn't matter that everybody had their own agenda. Somehow we all just piled together and worked on all of the agendas to make it all happen. We had to prioritize because we had limited resources. A lot of the state's resources were not coming to Polk initially. They were going to the harder hit areas south of us down in Punta Gorda. So we had to be very resourceful and very creative about how we met needs for all of those constituents that were on those calls every day. And if it hadn't been for them telling us what they needed, there's no way that we could have met those community needs. So that communication, it's not just the communication out of the communications department to the media that matters, but the communication with the stakeholders and the leaders around the county that made all the difference in the effective recovery.
My role is to support the team. My role is not to micromanage the team. And so the many occasions out at the Recovery Operations Center, I found myself getting updates, but it was an opportunity to be a cheerleader for the team. Because when you're looking around and people have been up 24 hours, you see some faces that are pretty tired. And you see some faces like, you know, hey, I'm ready for life to be back to normal. So my responsibility was to keep the team uplifted, make sure everybody felt good about what they were doing, because even under dire circumstances, we were making a difference every day. And I remember Jim Freeman, our deputy county manager at the time, telling me that all of the debris that we collected during the hurricane season of 2004, it filled the top of Raymond James Stadium. And so that gives you a pretty good indication of how much debris there was countywide.
One of the main things that come out of the season of 2004 is now we have an emergency operations center that it's built to suit 100 to 125 people. We do not have to go down and set up an EOC, what we call a COOP EOC, a continuity of operations, but now we have that facility. We do a lot of training, planning, exercises, but also we'll have an EOC 101 for all the team players that comes in to help build them in familiarity of what's expected of them.
Again, the more you can do on your own, sometimes with a small generator, if you don't have a generator for your house, setting up supplies that are non-perishable, bring in your water, those type of things is very important for you to do even today. And we haven't been hit very hard over the last few years, but we will be. You know, it's inevitable we will be again. So people need to take it serious when every year as we go into hurricane season and prepare some for themselves, because there may be days when you just can't get to you to help you.
To our friends who just moved to Florida, and to our friends who have lived in Florida, you know what to expect. If your next door neighbor is not from Florida, talk to them about their hurricane preparation as a citizen. Talk to them about the content of their kit. Make sure they understand where the public shelters are in case they need to leave their home.
Well, first of all, pay attention to what emergency management and is telling you, which is be prepared well ahead of time. The problem I've seen over and over again is these last-minute rushes for everybody to go. They buy up all the water, there's nothing on the shelves in the grocery stores, and then the people that's never been through a hurricane are freaking out because they think, oh, we gotta have all this water, we gotta have sandbags and all this other stuff. If you make that plan well in advance, prepare to be self-sufficient for 72 hours, get all that stuff in your kit ready, you're gonna survive this thing a whole lot better than those people that are stuck in line trying to get gas for their vehicle or trying to go to the grocery store or from store to store trying to find those last minute necessities that they think they're going to need. We run a lot of fires after the electricity goes out, people don't realize they had left their stove on, or they're using candles. We have a lot of fires start by candles, so I will say if you're going to use an emergency lighting source, that the hurricane lamp or the candles needs to be your last resort. Try to rely on something that's battery powered. A lot of stuff's solar operated now.
If you follow instructions and take precautions and do a little bit of advanced planning, most everybody's going to come out of the other side really just trying to clean up some yard debris and waiting for the power to come on. That's been my experience, and I'm starting to get a lot of experience, or at least if age is experience, I'm getting there.
Just pay attention, take about 5 minutes of your time, watch the weather, watch the news and see what it's doing. If something is anywhere in the vicinity that you think could possibly threaten, stay updated with it. We all have internet, take a glimpse at it, just pay attention to it two or three times a day.
You know, the likelihood that we have a major impact that impacts the entire county, or as we saw in Charley specifically, or even Francis and Jean, you know, we are the only county in the United States that I'm aware of that have had 3 actual hurricanes come through the county in the same season, the same year. So, you know, it could happen again. We hope it doesn't, but people just need to be ready. And yeah, our government cannot do it all. We bring in our, you know, part of our team are faith-based, volunteer, private sector organizations. So we're doing our best to do everything we can pre-storm and, you know, certainly post-storm to help our residents. But they've got to do their part too, or it just takes longer, makes things more complicated and delays, you know, response and then recovery efforts.
Even after the 3 hurricanes of 2004, we deploy to help other areas that's devastated by hurricanes. And we've done this a number of times. So county EMS, county fire, the sheriff's office, we're self-contained. We go there as a team, a united team, to make a positive difference. We learn. And what I learned early on, it's much better to give help than to need help. But in 2004, we needed help, and people responded to us to help us, just like we have always responded to other communities to help them.